Today we're taking apart this water blaster and creating a spaceship. It's by far the most detailed ship I've ever made, and I finished it just in time for a contest. Welcome to the Geeky Workbench. I had originally intended to make a sci-fi blaster from this, but then I came across the ships from Adam Dreyer and instantly changed my mind. Check out his builds and you'll see why. This blaster had a motor inside and a big water tank, which I'll keep for another project. For now, I only need the outer shells. At this point, I decided I would actually use the battery housing as it is to power the LEDs. I decided to use the shells upside down and a few centimeters apart. Ross from Cosmic Quest Hobbies has a rig onto which he mounts his models while working on them, so I thought I'd try something like that too. It worked fine most of the time, but I can definitely improve on that next time. Oh, and later I did attach this stand to a piece of wood for stability. To make the surface more compatible for gluing plastic parts to it, I covered the wooden block in styrene sheets, and I used a 2-part epoxy glue for that. Then my least favorite part, sanding down the surface to make gluing pieces to it and painting it easier. Happy about the shape of things, I started blocking out gaps and openings with XPS foam and styrene. Later I would remember an even better material for this and revisit some of the areas. After having closed the bottom, I decided I wanted to make hangar bays, so I took the bottom off again and also cut some side openings. Then I realized the openings weren't big enough for the hangar bays and chopped some more plastic off. In Adobe Illustrator, I created templates for the hangar bays. With the help of the Cricut machine, I cut the pieces from 1mm styrene sheet. My first idea was to have every starfighter stand on a small circle inside the bigger circle, but then I changed that to only one circle. That just looked better. And the idea behind that was that they could turn when a starfighter wanted to leave the hangar bay. These are just the outer parts that I can attach to the ship. A bit like with a matchbox, so I can slide in the actual hangar bays after I've painted them. At this point I really had to think about the scale, not only because of the size of the starfighters, but also because of the doors and panels inside the hangar bay, which were all hand cut. As you can imagine, this took quite a while, but I went even further because the panels still seemed a bit big, so I scored in some additional panel lines with a scribing tool. Okay, just a few more tiny panels. What have I gotten myself into? 3 more to go. I love the look of these, but I'm changing my strategy for panels a bit so I can actually get the ship finished in time for the contest. I'm going straight to the scoring part and skipping gluing individual panels. This is my little template idea for the Starfighters. I prepared the pieces with Adobe Illustrator and the Cricut machine again, so I would have somewhat identical ships. And I had thought about 3D printing them, but as I was entering the contest in the Scratch Build Converted category, I really wanted to make everything myself. So here's the building of my little fighter squadron. Now that the Starfighters are done, I could continue with the main ship. As I mentioned earlier, I remember the material I had, which is great for blocking out shapes and building structures. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but I think it's like a hard and rigid EVA foam. And before I glue anything into place, I need to get the wiring sorted out. I carved a trench in the wood where the openings in the ceilings to the hangar base would be, and then cut and soldered these small SMD LEDs to the correct length for that opening. Small SMD LEDs are great for really tight areas, but they break easily, so this part is always a bit nerve-wracking. Then it was time to make the bridge, which would also be lit with an SMD LED. I've never built a bridge for a spaceship before, and I found using lots of small greeblies helped sell the scale. Once the bridge and the lights for the hangar bays were installed, I could glue the outer boxes of the bays into place. The first iteration of engines were made of various tubes and plastic pieces, but even though I spent quite some time on them, I did not like how they turned out. So I designed new ones in Adobe Illustrator and built them from scratch using Styrene and a lot of additional panels. This is one of the sheets of panels I made. I thought, why not make a big variety of panels in different thicknesses ready for this and other projects too? And it turned out to be very useful. Some panels were cut from vinyl to have even more variation in thickness. To use the space in the model and the battery power more efficiently, I soldered the engine lights in series, as I did with the hangar bay lights. Now that all circuits were combined in a series parallel circuit and the switch installed, I could finally close up the ship, a huge milestone in this build because time was starting to run out. One of many checks if the LEDs were still working. Time to paint the hangar bay's inside boxes. And all the time I was so looking forward to this part, greeblies. I used parts from trains, tanks, trucks, old cameras and printers. After the bigger greeblies were on, I cut styrene to size to cover bigger areas, and then scored panel lines with the scribing tool. And there were a lot of areas that needed covering. The ship looked a little bit too flat underneath, so I decided to add some parts of 1/35th scale tanks to it, and to those I also added panels and greeblies. Finally, the first layer of primer. Next round of greeblies. And even more panels. At this stage I didn't have any time for filming. The contest was in a few days and I still needed to paint and weather the ship. Just in time for the contest at the Scale Model Challenge in Veldhoven. It was a great show and I'm really happy about the highly commended award I got for my ship. If you want to see more of the show, check out my video about the SMC. Now back at home, it's time for the final results. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. See you again next time. Bye!